everyone. Let's start off first with the NBA. Guys, they released their first half of the 2020-2021 regular season on Friday on ESPN's The. As far as we know, the season does begin December 22nd with a doubleheader. The first half will run through March 4th, fellas. And the schedule for the second half, which will start March 11th and run through May 16th, that will be released towards the end of the first half portion of said schedule. Each team will play 37 to 38 games during the first half, which includes a minimum of 17 home games and a maximum of 20. And nearly 52% of all regular season games have been scheduled for this first half. And the NBA is taking steps to reduce travel. We'll see almost a baseball version of a series mode where teams will play the same team twice in the same market. And this is obviously to minimize and obviate any sort of significant COVID-19 risk that will happen during the first half. So, Eman, I'll start with you. What do you think about the NBA releasing just the first half of their schedule and kind of playing it by ear as they navigate throughout the pandemic?
That was going to be my one bone to pick, actually. So when I saw the schedule released, I was all jacked up to see the matchups and what's in store and how the NBA would be handling what's going to be a season we haven't seen before, because the only basketball action we saw after COVID-19 hit was the bubble. And that was completely different from what we're going to be seeing with NBA actually returning to each team's arenas and playing at home venues. I was all jacked up to see it. But then I only saw half. So let me clarify. We're not going to see that second half of the schedule until the midway point of the season. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm not sure what that means, what that foretells. I think if you're making a commitment to play an entire season and not leave it open to discussion, not leave it open to disaster, and the last thing we need is another sports league on hold, you release that full schedule altogether. So that was the one concern I had when I saw the schedule. I'm sure they will be releasing that second half schedule at some point. I'm sure they are holding on to it and maybe just aren't shoving it in our face right now. But when you don't release half of a schedule, what kind of commitment are you making to the league and making sure that you see this season through to the end?
Well, I think it's a more realistic commitment. It's perhaps being a little bit more realistic than we just talked about the NFL and how they seem to be unaware of the circumstances, at least the commissioner. This is a league that seems to be a little bit more in touch with the fact that we are going to be in a figure it out as you go scenario. And I think they're just leaving their cards on the table to have a shortened regular season. The NBA, to me, doesn't require the 81 game season. I don't. It's not a sport that I particularly, and I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but not a sport that I'm typically really paying so much attention to until we do get to the postseason. I mean, of course, the regular season is critical to decide how everybody is seated, but it doesn't depend on a full schedule. So perhaps the concept is to be able to get to the playoffs early if that's the best public health measure. You saw baseball release their full 162 game season, I think, in August, which was sort of a show of confidence. And that made a lot of sense at the time. Here's the full schedule. We're going to do the whole thing in 2021. I understand the desire for some kind of confident overture. This is what we're going to do. We're ready to do it. I think the NBA is being realistic in saying we can't promise that we're going to get a full 81 games in this year.
Here's my issue, though. You should be able to promise. And I'm not saying that COVID-19 isn't going to be with us throughout this season. It's going to be a challenge, no doubt about it. The NBA is going to look things in the face that they haven't looked at in their history. But at what point do you just need to release a schedule and say, hey, put your money where your mouth is. We're going to do this thing? Because Major League Baseball better have 162 games in 2021.
But
COVID-19 may not be in a good spot right now, but I would say we are looking up in the sense that a workable vaccine is on the way. You're going to be in a scenario probably by early to mid 2021 where a pivot to normalcy is in order. So you can't release a full schedule after putting yourself through all those precautions throughout 2020 and taking it as seriously or more serious than any other league. Why shouldn't there be the utmost certainty where you can release, let's say, a 72 game schedule and say, here it is, we're playing? Major League Baseball did it with 162 before we even knew that COVID would maybe be behind us in 2021. And I think once that vaccine is out and it's proven effective, if you're not returning to normal then, when is it happening? So I think that's the weird nature of this release that I just don't get is we need a full NBA season. It's a foregone conclusion. Give it to us.
I would say this if I could, E-Man. I think the NBA, you guys mentioned how great of a job they did in the bubble. They're not going to be in the bubble. Players don't want to be in there for a 72-game season and the postseason. So I think the NBA, they understand that no matter what happens, inevitably, games will be postponed and rescheduled. That's why more than half of their schedule is going to happen in this first half and why the second half goes through, May 16th. So you're giving yourself some leeway to reschedule any games that you end up missing from December 22nd up to March 11th, up until the All-Star break. So I think for the NBA, it's realistic, as Chris mentioned. You want to make sure you at least give yourself some space to reschedule any games because we get down to this expanded playoff between seeds 7 and 10. If the 9th or 10th seed loses 3 games and they're down, let's say 4 or 5 games to get to that magic number of 2 games back, and they can't play those games or make those games back up, I mean, Chris, there's going to be teams that have a gripe with that. So I think Adam Silver really is just covering all of his bases here and making sure that teams have enough time to make up games and so that there's some integrity to this shortened season.
So by not releasing the second half, you're buying yourself time to make up games, you're saying?
Well, yeah, because there's going to be games that end up getting rescheduled, man. I can't imagine that all of these games in the first half get played. So if you're going to wait, you're going to include some of those games that need to be rescheduled in between March 11th and May 16th. So I think that is, I mean, they could, if they went out and said, here's all 72 games from now until May 16th, I'm sure fans would be more confident. But again, knowing what the pandemic is and what it's done to other sports, you can't blame the NBA for saying, here's our first half, and then we're going to work around that before we release our second half schedule.
I think I'm going to say this. I think that E-Man is having his cake and eating it too here, where he's criticizing the National Football League for being overzealous in its approach and then criticizing the NBA for being a little bit more measured in its approach. I think those are sort of contradictory.
I'm an in-between guy.
I don't know if you could draw that line.
I like reason. I like taking the
That's
past.
what the NBA is doing. They're being reasonable. They are being measured in their approach.
No, what you're saying is that they're being too cautious, and I'm criticizing them for that. And that's exactly what I think they're doing. I think they're going a little too crazy here when ultimately there's going to be a 2020-21 season. Us as the consumers, we need to know. We need to know what's going on. And basically what they've told us by doing this and only releasing half the schedule is, okay, 0 fans this year, not happening. Even though I would think some teams are going to want to get some fans in the arena as the season moves along. No fans, we don't care about you. You don't get to know the second half of the season. You don't get to know what's going on. And that matters.
Well,
you want to know why Major League Baseball releases 2021 in the middle of 2020? So the fans can get caught up. People need time to figure out their plans for the season.
Why? No, but why? I don't understand why. Why. I mean, I'm not hinging. I'm not, on the edge of my seat to know who the Mets are going to play in August of 2021. I haven't.
Are you a season ticket holder?
I am not a season ticket holder. The reality of putting people in the seats, we know how difficult that is, especially with a league that's going to tip off in the winter. Baseball, they're going to start in April. They have an outdoor venue. That's also critical. I think the NBA is a little bit more realistic here. And the idea that they're not releasing the second half does not preclude the idea of getting fans in the seats. They haven't said that at all. I don't know where you're reading that.
All right, guys, hold on.
I think it does. I think that creates a major obstacle where now fans have no idea who their team is playing in the second half of the season. How outrageous is that?
Who would buy tickets to a second half game right now anyways with what's going on?
That may not be what you do, but there's a reason why they release the schedules early in these leagues so people can make a plan. Okay. If I'm a hardworking individual who has a family, I want to know exactly which day I can go to Madison Square Garden.
I'm going to need my producer, Alex Walls, to mute Emmanuel. E-Man, you should get muted. Let me be a pro and transition into my next headline, because Emmanuel is definitely being unreasonable.